everything had been going smoothly. I had worked for years on this idea, pouring my soul into it, perfecting every detail. And then, without warning, it was stolen. The CEO, Victor Delacroix, the man I trusted, took my work and claimed it as his own. He presented it at the board meeting like it was his brainchild, his success. I felt a cold rage boiling inside me. The betrayal stung deeper than I thought possible. How could he do this to me? I had confided in him, shared every aspect of my vision. The realization hit hard. I had been nothing more than a pawn in his game. But this wasn't the end, not for me. I was going to expose him. I would take back what was mine, no matter the cost. Revenge had been planted in my heart. The wheels were already turning, and I would make sure he paid for what he'd done. The first step was to gather the evidence, to make sure no one could deny the truth. I couldn't just let this slide. Not now. Not ever. After that fateful meeting, I could hardly focus. Victor's smirk haunted me every time I closed my eyes. How could I have been so blind? I had to make this right, no matter the cost. I started to gather my thoughts and the evidence I'd need to expose him. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice. My idea, my work, had been stolen and twisted to fit his agenda. I couldn't let him get away with it. Each step I took felt like I was getting closer to the truth. I couldn't count on anyone but myself. The boardroom was filled with complacent faces, but they wouldn't remain passive forever. With Victor's charm in my work, he was untouchable. But I would change that. I just had to plan my move carefully. I couldn't afford any mistakes, not with everything on the line. It was time to take action. Time to fight back. That night, I met with my mentor, Ian Carter. He had always been there for me, guiding me through the highs and lows. But now I needed his wisdom more than ever. "You're walking a fine line, Lara," he warned. "Revenge can cost you more than you realize." I could see the concern in his eyes, the weight of his past. Ian had fought battles of his own, but I knew his experience would be crucial now. "I have no choice," I replied, my voice hardening. "I can't let him get away with this." Ian sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "Be careful. Once you start down this path, it's hard to turn back." I didn't want to hear his warnings. I had made up my mind. The betrayal burned too deeply to ignore. But as Ian spoke, a small part of me wondered if he was right. What if this thirst for justice would consume me? The next day, I was back at the office, determined to take the first step toward exposing Victor. I knew I had to be careful. He had eyes everywhere. But my mind was sharp, and I had learned how to play this game. The files I needed were in the hands of someone who owed me a favor. If I could get them, I would have the proof I needed to take Victor down. I met with my sidekick, Alex, who had been a close friend for years. He didn't like what I was doing, but understood why I had to do it. "This is dangerous, Lara," he said, his voice full of concern. "You're risking everything." But I was past the point of backing down. Alex didn't fully understand, but I didn't need him to. I just needed him to help me get the files. With that, we set our plan in motion. There was no turning back now. With the files secured, I could feel the pressure mounting. I was walking a dangerous line, and every step I took felt like it could be my last. Alex helped me go over the evidence, each piece confirming my worst fears. Victor's fingerprints were all over it. He had manipulated every detail to make it appear as if the idea was his from the start. I stared at the screen, the weight of what I was about to do sinking in. I was about to expose a powerful man, one who could ruin me in the blink of an eye. But the thought of justice kept me going. I wasn't just fighting for my idea. I was fighting for everything I had lost to this betrayal. I couldn't let fear stop me now. I had to expose him, no matter the cost. The following days passed in a blur. I knew I was on the edge of something dangerous, but I had no choice but to keep moving forward. The evidence was in my hands, but I needed more. Victor was always one step ahead, and I couldn't afford to make a mistake. My office became my war room. I spent every waking moment piecing together the puzzle, aligning the documents, emails, and notes. Every time I thought I was close, a new obstacle appeared. The feeling of being watched never left. I started receiving anonymous threats, subtle enough to be ignored, but clear enough to unsettle me. But I couldn't stop now. My mind was clear. Victor had to be exposed. His arrogance made him careless, and I knew I could use that to my advantage. I just had to wait for the right moment. I couldn't rush this. It had to be perfect. Time was on my side, and I would be patient. One evening I met Alex again, and this time his concern was palpable. He had been helping me gather information, but his hesitation was growing. "Lara, this isn't you," he said quietly, as we sat in a secluded cafe. "I've known you for years, and I've never seen you like this." He was right. The Lara he knew wasn't the woman staring down at a stack of incriminating documents. The fire in my heart was burning bright, but it was accompanied by a weight I couldn't ignore. "I can't let him get away with this, Alex," I replied, my voice steady. "I won't forgive him for what he's done." He stared at me for a long moment, his eyes filled with doubt, but he didn't say anything more. He didn't need to. I knew the path I was on, and no one was going to stop me. But deep down, part of me wished I could turn back. The days felt like a blur, and my plan was finally starting to come together. I had collected everything I needed, but Victor was still moving ahead with his plans. He hadn't noticed the cracks forming around him, but I could see them. His meetings had become more frequent, and his nerves were starting to show. The pressure was mounting, and I could feel it. One day, I overheard a conversation between Victor and his assistant. It wasn't intentional, but the words cut through the air like a knife. "We can't let her get away with this," Victor said, his voice sharp with anger. "She's becoming a problem." That was all I needed to hear. I now knew I had Victor exactly where I wanted him. His own words were the final piece. I could expose him for the fraud he was, and I would. Nothing was going to stop me now. Later that night I sat alone in my apartment, the weight of everything pressing down on me. I had the final piece of the puzzle, but there was still one thing that gnawed at me. Victor had powerful connections. Exposing him could destroy my career, my reputation, and everything I had worked for. But I couldn't back down now. I had come too far. I knew what he had done, and I couldn't let him go unpunished. My thoughts raced as I planned my next move. I had to be careful. I couldn't just run into this blindly. I needed proof, concrete evidence, and I needed to gather my allies. I reached out to Ian again. This time, his warning was harsher. "This path isn't what you think it is, Lara," he said over the phone. But I had made my decision. There was no turning back. I had to finish what I started. The next day, I set my plan into motion. I wasn't going to let fear stop me. I had the evidence, and now it was time to take action. I had secured a meeting with one of the board members who was sympathetic to my cause. If I could convince him, the rest of the board would follow. The meeting was tense, but I could see the doubt in his eyes as I presented the documents. "You're not just doing this for yourself, Lara," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "You're doing this for everyone he's wronged." It was exactly what I needed to hear. With his help I would expose Victor, and the world would know the truth. It was a risk, but it was the only way to ensure Victor would never hurt anyone again. This was it, the point of no return. I was ready. As the pressure continued to mount, I could feel Victor's influence closing in on me. I wasn't just fighting for my idea anymore. I was fighting for my survival. Every corner I turned, there was another threat. Alex, once supportive, started to pull back. His concern for me turned into fear, and I could see it in his eyes. "Lara, this is getting dangerous," he said one evening as we reviewed the files. "You're pushing too hard. Victor's going to retaliate." I couldn't let fear control me, but I couldn't ignore Alex's warning either. The stakes were higher than I had imagined. Victor wasn't just a man trying to steal an idea. He was a force, ruthless and determined. But I wasn't backing down. I had made it this far, and I couldn't stop now. I had allies in unexpected places, and the evidence was undeniable. Victor's downfall was inevitable. Victor was becoming increasingly paranoid, and it was showing in his behavior. He had started to watch me more closely, his eyes scanning the room whenever we crossed paths. I knew I had to move quickly before he caught on. One morning, as I sat in my office, I received an anonymous tip that Victor was planning a major meeting to discuss the next phase of the project. It was the perfect opportunity to gather more evidence. I could attend and gather everything I needed to expose him for good. But there was a catch. The meeting was being held at a secured location, away from the eyes of the public. It was risky, but it was my only chance to get the final piece of the puzzle. With Alex's help, I would infiltrate the meeting. If I succeeded, it would be the end of Victor's reign. The night before the meeting, I couldn't sleep. My mind raced with possibilities, each one more dangerous than the last. Alex had helped me prepare, but I knew there were risks. I had never done anything like this before. As I got ready, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, but I pushed it aside. I couldn't afford to second-guess myself. I had made it this far, and I had to see this through. When I arrived at the secured location, my heart was pounding. I had to slip past security, blend in, and stay unnoticed. But as I walked into the room where the meeting was being held, I saw him, Victor Delacroix, standing confidently at the front of the room. His eyes flickered to mine, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Had he already figured out my plan? The meeting was everything I had expected, and more. Victor and the executives discussed their next move, unaware that I was right there, listening. Every word they spoke made my blood boil. They were all complicit, each one more interested in their personal gain than in the truth. But then, something unexpected happened. One of the board members, the same one who had shown hesitation before, slipped me a folder. It was filled with information that could take Victor down. He leaned in, his voice low, and said, "This is for you, Lara. We've all seen what's happening, but someone had to make the first move." My heart raced. This was it, the final proof I needed. But I knew I couldn't leave just yet. I had to ensure that nothing could go wrong. I had to be meticulous, careful, and take down Victor once and for all. As I walked out of the building, the weight of the folder in my hand felt like a bomb waiting to explode. The moment I stepped into the cool night air, I felt the adrenaline hit. I had the proof, but I knew Victor wouldn't go down without a fight. The next few days would determine everything. I couldn't afford to waste time. My phone buzzed, and it was a message from Alex. "Be careful," it read. "Victor knows he's coming after you." Panic surged through me, but I quickly regained control. This was it, the point of no return. I couldn't run. I had to stand my ground. The truth was in my hands, and I wasn't going to let him win. I would expose Victor, no matter what it took. The next morning, I stood in front of my computer, staring at the folder filled with Victor's secrets. It was all there, the smoking gun that could take him down. But as I scrolled through the documents, a sense of dread washed over me. What if this was a trap? What if Victor knew I was close to exposing him? Doubt crept in, but I couldn't afford to hesitate. I had come too far to turn back. The evidence was irrefutable, and the truth was on my side. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into a trap. Victor wasn't the type to go down without a fight. He had power, influence, and the resources to destroy me if he wanted to. But I had no choice. I had to act before he made the first move. I couldn't let him win, not when I was so close to exposing everything. As the day wore on, I knew I had to make a move. I couldn't keep this information to myself any longer. The only way to ensure that Victor couldn't escape was to go public. I decided to meet with a journalist I trusted, someone who could help me expose the truth to the world. But even as I dialed the number, I felt a pit form in my stomach. What if Victor had already gotten to him? What if the media was already under his control? Doubts swirled in my mind, but I had to push them aside. I couldn't let Victor silence me. I arrived at the meeting place, a small secluded cafe in the city. The journalist Ryan was already waiting for me. He was in his mid-30s, with short, dark hair and a sharp suit. "Lara," he greeted me, his voice steady, but I could see the concern in his eyes. "What's this all about?" As I handed Ryan the folder, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. This was it. The truth was finally going to come out. But as Ryan looked through the documents, his face shifted from curiosity to confusion. "Lara, this is good, but it's not enough," he said. "We need more. This doesn't expose the full extent of what Victor's done." My heart sank. I thought I had everything I needed, but now I realized that there were gaps in the story. Victor was clever, too clever. He had covered his tracks well, and the documents I had were just the beginning. I couldn't stop now. I had to dig deeper, find the missing pieces, and get the whole truth. "I'll get what you need," I said, my voice steady despite the rising panic. "I'm not giving up until this is exposed." That night, I couldn't sleep. The weight of the situation was too much. I had the evidence, but it wasn't enough. I had to find the missing link, the one thing that would tie it all together and destroy Victor's carefully crafted empire. I sat in front of my computer, researching every detail I could find about Victor's past. The deeper I dug, the more I uncovered. His manipulations, his lies, and his connections to shady figures in the industry were all coming to light. It was clear now, Victor had been playing a dangerous game for years. But as I connected the dots, a sense of dread crept over me. What if I wasn't the first to discover this? What if someone else was already planning to take him down? I had to act quickly, before anyone else got to the truth before I did. The next morning, I was ready. I had everything I needed. The final piece of the puzzle had fallen into place, and now I had the ammunition to bring Victor down. I reached out to Ryan again, this time with everything I had. "I've got it," I told him over the phone. "The final piece. This is it." As I spoke, I could hear the excitement in his voice. "Send it over, Lara. This is going to change everything." I sent the files immediately, my heart racing. I had no idea what the fallout would be, but I was prepared for anything. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. The end was near, and Victor's empire was about to crumble. It was only a matter of time. The day had finally come. Ryan called, his voice full of urgency. "Lara, it's worse than we thought. The files you sent, they've been tampered with." My heart dropped. I couldn't believe it. I had double-checked everything. How could this happen? But the more Ryan explained, the clearer it became. Someone had gotten to the evidence before it reached the public. It was an elaborate setup to discredit me, to make it look like I was fabricating everything. "We've got to fix this, Lara," Ryan said, his voice firm. "But we're running out of time." Panic surged through me. I had no idea who could be behind this, but I had to find out. Victor was smart, manipulative, he could have anyone in his corner, but I wasn't going to let him win. Not after everything I had sacrificed. I would fight back. The stakes were higher than ever, but I wasn't backing down now. I couldn't afford to lose my cool. I had to act quickly. I met with Alex, who had been quiet for days, his own sense of fear palpable. "What do we do now?" he asked, his voice strained. "This isn't just about Victor anymore. We've got bigger enemies." I nodded. I knew he was right. The stakes were higher than ever. Victor wasn't just a corporate thief, he was part of something much bigger. I had uncovered pieces of a much larger network, a web of lies and deceit stretching far beyond what I had imagined. I had to expose it all, but I didn't know where to start. The enemy was too close, too powerful. But as I sat across from Alex, I realized that running away wasn't an option. The truth had to come out. "We're not done," I said, my voice firm. "We're just getting started." The next step was clear. I needed to confront Victor. But this time, I wasn't going to let him control the narrative. I had a plan, and it involved using his own arrogance against him. He had underestimated me, assuming I would crumble under pressure. But I wasn't the same person I was when I started this journey. I had grown, learned, and adapted. I had the power now, and I wasn't going to let him take it from me. I walked into his office, calm and composed, my heart beating with purpose. "Victor," I said, my voice steady, "it's time to end this." He looked at me, his expression flickering with surprise, but his smirk quickly returned. "You think you can win this battle, Lara?" he scoffed. "You're out of your league." But his words didn't faze me. I had everything I needed. The truth was on my side, and nothing could change that. Victor's confidence began to waver as I revealed the final pieces of the puzzle. He tried to deny everything, but the evidence was too overwhelming. "You can't do this to me," he spat, his voice dripping with venom. But his arrogance was fading, replaced by fear. He realized I was serious. For the first time I saw him falter. I wasn't just a pawn in his game anymore. I had become the player, and I was about to win. "You're not going to get away with this," I said, my voice cold and resolute. His eyes flashed with anger, but I could see the fear creeping in. He knew the walls were closing in, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. It was too late for him. His empire was crumbling, and I was the one holding the truth. The fallout was immediate. News outlets picked up the story, and within hours, Victor's world began to crumble. The board turned on him, and his allies scattered. The man who once held so much power was now facing the consequences of his actions. I watched the news coverage, a sense of satisfaction filling me. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice. I had taken back what was mine, but I had also exposed the truth to the world. The weight that had been pressing down on me for so long had lifted. I was finally free. But as I sat there, I realized something. The battle was over, but the war for justice was never truly done. There would always be more lies to uncover, more people to fight for. But I was ready. I had fought this battle, and I had won. The time had come to face Victor one last time. He had been cornered, the walls closing in around him. His empire was crumbling, and I was the one who had made it happen. But as I walked toward his office, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. There was a shift in the air, a coldness that wasn't there before. Victor was no longer the confident man I had once known. His arrogance had faded, replaced with desperation. As I stepped into his office, his gaze locked onto mine. "You think you've won, don't you?" he sneered. But this time his voice was trembling. "I've already won," I replied, my voice calm and controlled. The power had shifted. Victor was no longer the one in control. The truth was out, and there was no going back for him. He had underestimated me, and now he would pay the price. Victor's confidence shattered completely as I revealed the final pieces of the puzzle. His hands trembled, and his eyes darted nervously around the room. He had no escape now. "You don't understand," he muttered. "This is bigger than you." But I didn't flinch. I had uncovered everything, every lie, every manipulation. Victor had spent years building an empire on deceit, but the truth had always been there, waiting to be exposed. "You're finished," I said quietly. His facade crumbled as he leaned back in his chair, the reality of his situation setting in. He could no longer hide behind his power. His secrets were out, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. "It's over," I repeated, my voice firm. The fight had been long, but in this moment, victory was mine. As Victor's world crumbled around him, I could see the desperation in his eyes. He tried to negotiate, to offer me deals that were impossible to refuse. "I can make this go away," he promised. "You don't have to do this." But I was done listening. The man who had once held my future in his hands was now begging for his life. "You had your chance," I said coldly, turning away from him. "Now it's my turn." As I walked out of his office, I could hear him shout after me, but I didn't turn back. I had won. But I knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The media would tear him apart, and his reputation would be destroyed. He had no one left to hide behind. The truth had set me free, and now it would do the same for everyone else he had wronged. The moment I left Victor's office, I knew there was no turning back. The truth had been revealed, but it wasn't just about bringing him down. It was about setting things right for everyone he had hurt. The journey had been long and painful, but it had made me stronger. I had fought for my idea, for my future, and for the justice that had been denied to me for so long. As I stepped out into the cool night air, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I had reclaimed what was mine. I had exposed the lies, and now the world would know the truth. But I also knew that this victory came at a price. The battle had been won, but there would always be more battles to fight. The fight for justice was never truly over. But tonight I could rest easy, knowing that I had done what was right. As I watched the news coverage of Victor's downfall, I couldn't help but feel a sense of finality. The truth had been exposed, and the world had taken notice. But there was no celebration, no sense of triumph. The truth had come at a heavy cost. I had lost parts of myself along the way, my trust, my innocence, my belief in the goodness of others. But I had gained something too: strength, wisdom, and a resolve to never let anyone take advantage of me again. As I sat alone in my apartment, the weight of everything settled in. The battle was over, but the journey wasn't finished. There would always be more to fight for, more to uncover. But for now, I could rest. I had fought and won, and I would never forget the lessons I had learned along the way. As I stood outside the courthouse, the weight of everything finally hit me. The battle was over, but the scars would remain. Victor had been exposed, and the truth was out. But I wasn't sure what came next. My life had been turned upside down, and for the first time in months, I had no idea what the future held. The past had shaped me into someone stronger, but at what cost? I had achieved what I set out to do, but now I had to live with the consequences. What was I going to do with my newfound freedom? The world felt different, as though I was walking in unfamiliar shoes. The victory was hollow. The journey had changed me in ways I couldn't quite explain. I knew one thing for sure: I was never going to let anyone take advantage of me again. I had learned the hard way that trust could be shattered in an instant. As I walked away from the courthouse, I couldn't help but think about the people who had helped me along the way. Ian, Alex, Ryan. Each one had played a role in my journey. They had been my support when I felt like giving up, guiding me when I lost my way. I thought about Alex, his warning now echoing in my mind. "Don't lose yourself in this fight, Lara." It was advice I had ignored then, but now I understood the weight of his words. The fight had consumed me, taken everything I had, but now I was free. The world was still a harsh place, but I had gained something valuable: my own strength. The truth had set me free, but it had come at a cost. I would never forget the lessons I had learned. Later that evening, I met with Ian. We sat in a small, dimly lit restaurant, the soft hum of conversation around us. "You did it," he said, his voice calm but filled with pride. "You brought him down." I smiled weakly, but it wasn't the victory I had imagined. It was more complicated than that. "I didn't do it alone," I replied. "I had help, people who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." Ian raised his glass in a silent toast. "You were the one who pushed through. You never gave up." His words meant more than he could ever know. "It's over now," I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I felt a lingering uncertainty. What came next? The fight was over, but the aftermath was still unfolding. I wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time I was ready to face it. The next few days passed in a blur. I stayed at home, resting and reflecting on everything that had happened. The calls, the meetings, the constant stress. It all seemed so distant now. But as the days went on, I realized something. The world hadn't stopped turning. People were still going about their lives, oblivious to the struggles I had endured. I had fought for something important, something personal, but the world had moved on. The media had covered Victor's downfall, and the public's attention had shifted. It was a sobering thought. The world didn't stop for anyone. But that didn't mean my fight was in vain. I had stood up for myself, and in doing so, I had proven something to myself, that I was stronger than I had ever known. The phone rang, breaking the silence of the room. It was Alex. "Lara," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I just wanted to say, you did it. You've changed everything." I paused, the weight of his words sinking in. "We did it, Alex. We all did it." And in that moment, I realized something. This wasn't just my victory. It was a victory for everyone who had been wronged, for everyone who had ever felt powerless in the face of injustice. I had fought for more than just my idea. I had fought for the truth. The world had seen the truth, and there was no going back. "What now?" Alex asked. "What comes next?" I thought for a moment before answering. "We keep moving forward," I said. "We don't stop." And for the first time in a long while, I felt like the future was mine to shape.